Good evening, friends and neighbors, and welcome to our program, Know Your Rights, House Bill 6 and its impact on school discipline in the Bastrop community. Our goal this evening is to review the policy of HB 6 and its impact on our community and the schools. We have two speakers tonight who I am happy to introduce to you. Princess Jefferson is a proud Houston native and a legal fellow with Texas Appleseed's Education Justice Project. In her role, Princess works to advance educational equity and dismantle the school-to-prison pipeline by challenging discriminatory discipline practices, fighting against the privatization and closure of public schools, and protecting culturally relevant curriculum in K-12 classrooms. In support of this work, during her time at Texas Appleseed, Princess has filed petitions before the court, lobbied at the Texas Capitol against discriminatory bills, co-authored policy pieces and legal research, and currently serves as co-counsel in a case involving racial discrimination and harassment in one of Texas's school districts. Princess earned her Juris Doctor from Howard University School of Law and her bachelor's degree from Bryn Mawr College. Her unwavering commitment to racial and social justice is grounded in her own lived experience with systemic racism and educational inequities, which continues to guide her work. Princess will be speaking on the new laws and their potential impact on school communities. Norma Mercado is the executive director of Bastrop County Cares and has over 24 years of experience in education and social services. Formerly the Family and Social Services Coordinator for Bastrop Independent School District, she led the social work department and helped develop the Family Resource Center in support of highly mobile students and families. Born in Chihuahua, Mexico, and raised as a migrant worker, Norma's experiences with homelessness, teen pregnancy, and poverty fuel her passion for advocacy. A Master of Social Work graduate and PhD student at Texas State University, her work has been featured in the New York Times and Univision's Aquí y Ahora. Norma will be speaking to us on parent engagement and available resources. And we will now hear from Princess. Is that right? Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Dan, for that wonderful introduction. We can jump right into the overview of Texas Appleseed and our projects. Right after that, we're going to dive into HB 6 and the impacts on the community, specifically the changes that have been made to in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, disciplinary alternative education programs, which I will refer to as DAEPs throughout the course of this presentation, in addition to emergency placements, expulsions, and virtual expulsions, the impact on the Bastrop community, a few advocacy tools, and then we'll open it up for questions before turning it over to my colleague, Norma, Okay. For those who may not know, Texas Appleseed is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization focused on supporting vulnerable communities and reshaping state and local rules by working with a host of partners to identify real solutions to ongoing problems that affect people's real lives. Texas Appleseed have many project areas, two of which are represented here tonight. The first being my project, the Education Justice Project, and the second being our wonderful community organizing project. Much of Texas Appleseed's work involves legislative advocacy, where we work to create and change laws for the benefit of Texas communities. One big impact that we made was being able to lobby before the legislature and ensure that students and youth experiencing homelessness were still able to get their state IDs for free. Jumping right into the overview of school discipline in HB 6. Generally, school discipline is referred to as the actions that a school may take to maintain order, ensure safety, and assign consequences to students who break rules. For purposes of this presentation, we are only focusing on the last point and discussing the ways in which schools discipline students who break said school rules. Some of those ways, that we are looking at school discipline include writing students up and getting disciplinary referrals, assigning detention, removing students from their classrooms, in-school and out-of-school suspension, and sending students to DAEPs, JJAEPs, and expulsions. Of course, we know that certain measures are, of course, needed to ensure order in schools and, of course, keep students safe. I do think it's important to know that almost everything on the list that I've just named is a form of exclusionary discipline. which research has shown us time and time again does not actually deter misconduct and inherently has a negative impact on student outcomes. Now, where does HB6 come into play with that? HB6 has a major impact on the way school discipline is viewed today. HB6 is a partisan school discipline law that went into effect last year, expanding schools' exclusionary discipline authority through sweeping changes to teacher removal privileges, school suspensions, alternative placements, and expulsions. However, HB6 did add new language allowing for different, forms of advocacy among parents and teachers that we will go over today as well. All right, so the first area that I would like to address and cover that, has been heavily impacted by HB6 is in-school suspensions. In-school suspensions are just one of two types of forms of suspension utilized in schools, the other being out-of-school suspensions, which we will cover on the next slide. In-school suspension is the process of removing a child from their regular class and putting them in a separate supervised classroom on campus. Before HB6, school districts limited how long a student could be placed in ISS, which could not exceed 3 days. However, after HB6, schools no longer have limits on the amount of time in which they can place a student in ISS. They can also count them as present and are expected to give them the same instruction and educational services they would receive in their regular classrooms. However, one good thing that does come out of HB6 where ISS is concerned, one good thing that comes out of HB6's changes to ISS is the fact that school administrators are required to review a student who is placed in ISS for every 10 days. So that's really important to know. A few concerns, however, that come into play under HB6 with ISS is that ISS is still a form of exclusionary discipline. And we know that does indeed impact a student's academic engagement and performance. This is particularly important where Latino, Black, and marginalized and minority communities are concerned because research has increasingly shown us that decreased engagement leads to grade retention and higher dropout rates. Second, HB6 requires that students receive comparable course instruction in ISS to what they would receive in their normal classes. However, given limited educational resources and the lack of limits on the number of students that can be placed in ISS and how long they can stay there, it is very unlikely that students in ISS will actually receive instruction or services equivalent to those in their traditional classroom settings. Third, extended ISS placements raise issues of social isolation, peer separation, capacity strain, as teachers and administrators may increasingly rely on ISS as a default for in response to what they deem as challenging students. Finally, because ISS assignments can now last for weeks or even months, and the law does not require the schools implement robust return to classroom support or periodic reviews, there are serious risks to students' academic progress and social development, particularly for younger students and those with disabilities. So what can parents do where that is concerned? Just in brief, because I know Norma will touch on this, parents can request documentation that their students are receiving appropriate behavioral and socio-emotional support. And they can also request, again, that their administrator actually goes and take the step of reviewing their child's placement every 10 days. All right. Where OSS, still slow down, okay. Where out-of-school suspension is concerned, out-of-school suspension prohibits a student from coming to school and requires that they stay home for the duration of the suspension. Now, before HB6, schools could assign students OSS for an unlimited period of time, decide if their OSS would affect attendance, and students experiencing homelessness or below the 3rd grade were excluded from OSS except in special circumstances. Now, after HB6, OSS and ISS have essentially swapped places, okay? Under HB6, out-of-school suspensions are capped at now only a maximum of 3 school days, and students experiencing homelessness or below the 3rd grade can be excluded from the classroom under 2 new provisions. Now, the concerns that come out with OSS under HB6 are that HB 6's 3-day limit prevents indefinite OSS assignments but shifts the disciplinary burden toward in-school alternatives and administrative discretion, which may increase long-term ISS placements. This would also happen if students are reassigned from OSS to ISS, and that may happen in cases where parents say, listen, I'm not able to stay home with my child. I need you to give them something else. And schools, of course, are allowed to place that student in ISS instead of OSS, which, of course, would mean they can stay there for an unlimited duration of time. Again, going back to increased potential risk of dropout rates, peer isolation, all the things that I listed on the previous slide. HB 6 also fails to define the new behavioral categories that would subject students below the 3rd grade and experiencing homelessness to OSS, which may lead to subjective and inconsistent enforcement. And just one of those things, being the new provisions that would allow students below the 3rd grade to be placed in OSS, include conduct that threatens the immediate health and safety of others, or conduct that is documented, repeated, or a significant disruption to the classroom, which must be documented by the district. But again, those terms are undefined, which opens the door for different schools to have various interpretations of what that could, constitute for students. In those cases, parents who can't supervise their children are, again, of course, allowed to ask for an alternative. But again, the risk is, of course, allowing them to be in ISS for extended periods of time. Parents could also review Bastrop's rules to confirm how OSS affects attendance to ensure that their kids won't be deemed truant. And lastly, parents may seek documentation and request behavioral assessment or evaluation if repeated disciplinary issues arise, especially for younger students and those experiencing homelessness or those that have disabilities. For DAEPs, or in other words, disciplinary alternative education programs, a DAEP is an alternative education setting used to temporarily place students who have committed disciplinary infractions. DAEP placements prior to HB 6 were mandatory for certain offenses and discretionary for others. Districts determined how long a student stayed in a DAEP, which could range from a few weeks to an entire school year. Students below the 3rd grade and those experiencing homelessness were largely protected from DAEPs, again, except in limited circumstances. The law did not include provisions for virtual DAEPs, and placement in a DAEP was almost always in person at a separate campus or facility. However, after HB 6, mandatory DAEP placements are now at the discretion of school districts and school administrators who can assign a student for a single incident of disruptive or unruly behavior. So let's just say, for example, a student acts out one time. The school can say, hey, that's enough for me to send them to a DAEP, which again is a form of exclusionary discipline. Students may be sent to a DAEP if their conduct seriously interferes with class instruction or normal school activities, or those that constitute disruptive activities. Students with disabilities may now be placed in a DAEP after a manifestation hearing is held. And virtual DAEPs are only allowed for expelled students in limited circumstances, but the district, of course, must ensure that the student has sufficient computer equipment, internet access to participate fully, and they also have to provide these resources at no cost to parents. They also need to make sure that they have reliable computers, high-speed internet, necessary technical and software support. Administrators, where virtual DAEPs are concerned, must conduct periodic reviews every 45 days to assess whether continuation is appropriate. Now, there are a lot of concerns that come about with DAEPs under HB 6, one of which being that while HB 6 lessens mandatory DAEP placement rules, it grants schools wider discretion to assign students to DAEPs for single incidences and broad categories of disruptive conduct, which could increase the number of placements overall. Those schools have more discretion for first-time vape offenses, which of course we know across the state of Texas and even across the country, student vape usage is continuously increasing. The mandatory requirement is still in effect for second-time vaping offenses, which denies students substance assistance to address the root problem and removes them again from the classroom. With terms like seriously interfere and disruptive activities undefined, there is a heightened concern for students with disabilities and students of color who already face disproportionate discipline in the school districts. For virtual DAEPs, while these provide flexibility for expelled students, issues around internet access, quality of instruction, and social isolation arise, and though there is a required 45-day review, that may be difficult if the districts lack capacity to conduct these and, of course, close monitoring. As we know, many school districts are experiencing budget cuts. So it is very unlikely that a school district would be able to go into numerous students, assess numerous students who may be placed in a DAEP. Now, what can families do? Parents may review DAEP criteria and placement links, assess documentation and alleged justifications given for DAEP placements, including whether was a first-time offense and whether interventions were even attempted. Parents may also request behavioral assessment if behavior may be disability related. For virtual DAEP placements, parents may ensure technology and internet access meet the district's legal obligations. And lastly, families of students with disabilities in virtual DAEPs may request their child's administrators review their placements earlier than the 45-day requirement at any time, especially if virtual placements pose learning or mental health challenges to their child. That's really important to know. Now, where emergency placements are concerned, emergency placements refer to the immediate removal of a student from a regular classroom setting due to severe behavioral issues or threats to safety. Before HB 6, previously school districts could perform emergency removals of a student to a DAEP for behavior posing an immediate threat to others' safety or for behavior considered serious misconduct. This required documentation, parental notification, and a prompt hearing or review to determine whether continued placement was justified. Administrators were also encouraged to look for patterns of behavior except in cases involving severe or violent behavior. Now, after HB 6, principals can place students in a DAEP after just one incident of misbehavior, and a pattern of repeated behavior is no longer required. As long as the student's behavior is unruly, disruptive, or abusive so that it would seriously interfere with the teacher's ability to teach or other students' ability to learn or the normal operation of school, they may be removed. HB 6 also adds provisions allowing a school district to seek a court injunction to immediately remove a student from their current setting if a threat assessment team determines that the student's continued presence is substantially likely to cause physical harm to others. Furthermore, a court can authorize placement in an alternative educational setting while these cases are being reviewed. Now, while HB 6 lessens the DAEP placement rules, principals and administrators have greater authority to remove students after a single incident for conduct that may not previously have warranted emergency removal and no longer have to show a pattern of behavior which could lead to increased DAEP placements. Because the law fails to define what seriously interfere, unruly, disruptive, or abusive mean, schools can interpret these differently, which could lead to disproportionate placement and disciplinary enforcement across the district, particularly affecting younger students and students with disabilities, which can also again increase their placements in a DAEP. Emergency placements also interrupt a student's education where DAEP facilities do not have the same level of instruction, are largely computer-based, ill-staffed, and ill-equipped to handle mental and social issues that students face. They also lack the space due to capacity issues, causing many students to be grouped with other students at different class levels. For reference, on the Education Justice team, we have seen various incidences where you may have a student in the 3rd grade placed in a DAEP with a student in the 6th grade. And so it is impossible to say that they are actually receiving a level of instruction on par with their grade level and to that what they will be actually receiving in their traditional classroom setting. Likewise, without clear limits or robust review periods or procedures, these placements function as a de facto long-term removal. In these cases, parents can request all documentation related to their child's alleged behavioral incident, meet with school administration to discuss the decision, request written justification citing specific education code provisions applied, ask the school for clarity on how their child's behavior may rise to one of the terms left undefined by the district, and they can appeal an emergency placement through district policy or consult an emergency an education advocate for their child or attorney if the situation calls for such. Expulsions and virtual expulsions. A school expulsion is the most severe form of exclusionary discipline and is defined as the permanent or long-term removal of a student from their regular school setting for up to a year or more as part of a formal process initiated by schools and a hearing in response to serious violations of school policy. Virtual expulsions are also severe and are the permanent or long-term removal of students from their regular in-person or online school setting due to behavior violations, but instead of losing educational services entirely, they are moved to a mandatory full-time virtual disciplinary program. Before HB 6, conduct leading to expulsion had to occur on campus or at school-related events, and districts had to provide notice and a hearing and an opportunity to appeal before finalizing their decisions. Expelled students were typically sent to a DAEP, though some districts use in-district alternatives for short-term removals. Now, after HB 6, the list of mandatory expellable offenses, regardless of mitigating factors, has expanded. Permissive expulsions are still allowed, but are more likely to occur for single serious incidents or conduct judged to seriously interfere with teaching, learning, or school operations, which can be done without evidence of repeated behavior, which is a major change from the previous law. Mandatory expellable offenses also no longer have to occur on school grounds or at school-sponsored events, and students can be expelled for certain serious offenses that occur off campus at any time or location, including after-hour incidences that schools determine have a nexus to safety, order, or reputation. Students may also be expelled to a virtual DAEP only if no juvenile justice alternative education program placement is available and must be provided with a reliable computer and high internet access, necessary educational software, all the items that were previously listed on the previous slide. Now, the impact under HB 6 where expulsions and virtual expulsions are concerned are that school administrators have more power to expel students for off-campus and single-incident conduct, but reduced power to consider mitigating factors for conduct now leading to mandatory expulsion. Because the law fails to define serious interference or imminent harm in relation to behavior that can lead to expulsion, decisions about expulsions may vary widely, creating potential for inconsistent and unequal enforcement across the districts. Overall, students may face long-term removal for isolated or off-campus events, reducing instructional continuity and increasing the likelihood of academic setbacks or disengagement. In these circumstances, parents are able to request written documentation explaining the grounds for expulsion, ask whether the expulsion is mandatory or permissive, and if it's permissive, they can advocate for alternative interventions. Parents can also file an appeal within 3 to 5 days and request a copy of the Student Code of Conduct and relevant hearing procedures. Where the student may have a disability, parents can request an ARD or 504 meeting to ensure that they are compliant with law. Now, how does all of this impact the Bastrop community? Well, one, increased classroom removal could deepen existing academic challenges. Currently, 71.3% of students in Bastrop are at risk of dropping out, and more than half of the schools, 11 out of 17 to be exact, are struggling academically and below TEA satisfaction. Thus, expanded use of ISS, DAEPs, and expulsions under HB6, even when students are counted as present, can worsen achievement gaps, especially in schools already receiving D and F ratings in student performance, school progress, and closing gaps. Student disconnection from instruction, grade retention, and dropout rates will also likely increase under these circumstances. We also may see a disproportionate impact on Latino, low-income, and special education students. In Bastrop, 76.9% of Bastrop students are Latino, 61.84% are economically disadvantaged, and 16.6% of students receive special education services. Therefore, undefined discipline terms in HB6 like significant disruption or safety threat increase the risk of uneven discipline and reinforcement of existing disparities for vulnerable student groups, as schools may rely on their own subjective definitions when applying these new expanded permissive rights under HB6. Additionally, greater reliance on DAEPs and emergency removals can strain resources and student outcomes in Bastrop. Currently, Bastrop has only one DAEP, which is Gateway DAEP. So increased discretion to remove students after a single incident or could overwhelm staff and raise capacity concerns, thereby increasing the likelihood of students being placed in ISS for an unlimited period. Overall, this raises concerns around social and academic supports for students. Younger students and students with disabilities and students experiencing homelessness also face heightened risk. 12 out of 17 of schools in Bastrop serve younger students. 16.16% of students receive special education services, and 1.9% of students are experiencing homelessness. These students are now more at risk of being disciplined more frequently due to broader, undefined behavioral categories and being removed from the classroom, especially where Bastrop ISD does not require behavioral or emotional training for all of its staff. Currently, my research showed that only one school in Bastrop has been required to undergo this type of training for its teachers. Virtual disciplinary placements may also widen equity gaps. Given Bastrop's high number of economically disadvantaged students, virtual DAEP settings could pose significant barriers like limited internet access, lack of supervision, and reduced quality instruction, potentially increasing disengagement and dropout risk. More exclusion for single incidents could increase long-term disengagement and disproportionate discipline. Due to Bastrop's high number of Latino and at-risk students, expanded authority for expulsions and removals, especially for off-campus events or first-time behavior, means that more students could face long-term separation from school, and students of color are at risk of profiling, dropout rates, and juvenile justice involvement. Just a few rights and recommendations for parents. Know your rights. Use those rights. Advocate early and often. Push for accountability and seek additional support. Where teachers are concerned, document consistently. Be sure to keep detailed records of your students' behavior and interventions to support fair and transparent discipline decisions. Use alternatives when possible. While we understand that HB6 has given teachers more authority to write students up and, of course, allow them to be removed from the classroom, we want to make exclusion the least, the last alternative that we can possibly go to for students who may be, not following the rules in their classrooms, okay? We want to make sure that we're communicating with families and be mindful of impact. Recognize how repeated removals can affect student learning and connection to school, especially for vulnerable students. Many students may act out due to things going on at home, so we want to make sure that we're addressing the root cause and not just removing them from the classroom and that root cause never gets addressed. Where administrators are concerned, ensure the consistency and clarity. Monitor discipline trends, track who is disciplined, how often, and for how long to prevent overuse or disparities in ISS, OSS, a DAEP, or expulsions. Invest in support systems, strengthen behavioral supports, counseling, and intervention programs where possible, and protect due process. We want to make sure that parents know their rights and understand their rights. We want to make sure they understand timelines for appeals and have access to all required documentation and meetings. With that, if there are any questions thus far before I turn it over to my colleague Norma, please feel free to use our meter that was discussed by Dan early on, or feel free to drop them in the chat.
And just want to remind, I know Princess talked about this, but the importance of parent engagement, and it really does matter. Working in schools for 24 years, something that I noticed was that parent engagement is really good in the primary years, but as students go to middle school and high school, we see the decline in parent engagement. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Oftentimes, our high school students really don't want us to be around schools, but there's other ways that parents need to continue to be engaged. It does it provides better outcomes for students. It improves students' behavior, and there's stronger communication. And I firmly believe that parents are the first educators of their children. So what is a Title I campus? Title I is a federal program that provides funding and resources to schools within that have a high percentage of students with low-income families. And we just heard the statistics. So a lot of the campuses in Bastrop are Title I schools. This ensures that every child, regardless of the background, has access to a quality education. Under Title I, they can get additional funding for academic support, like tutoring, interventions, and enrichment programs, like your after-school programs, parent engagement, resources and events designed for parents. And this is where your voice matters. These events are designed for parents to participate in, but you also get to decide what those should be and what should be included. They can also use funding for additional staff and services like counselors, specialists. I see other districts, for example, hiring parent support specialists who are really helpful to support parents. You also have the right to be involved, to make decisions that affect your child's education. You have the right to receive all communication in a language that you can understand. You have the right to know whether your child's teacher is certified and meet qualifications. And I really encourage parents to review the compact. The compact includes the school parent compact includes, it's a written agreement between the school, the parent, and the student. And this, you should be able to go to your school and request a copy of the parent compact. And then your role in the discipline decision, as we heard, there's a lot of space for parent voice. Attend those meetings. You have the right to be there. Let them know when is the best time for you so that you can be there. Request clarifications on any decisions. Ask what led to this outcome and what support is available for my child. Advocate for alternative options like you've heard, and request support services like counseling, mental health. Read the student code of conduct. We already heard that, so I'm going to echo that again, making sure you know what are the behavior expectations at this campus. Sometimes we make assumptions that, especially if you move from school to school, that it's going to be the same, but they're not. There's some differences. Also make sure you and your child understand what are the discipline consequences, and then know your student and parent rights. Stay involved in your child's school. Here it varies. Some campuses have PTAs, some have PTOs, but that's a great way to stay involved. Attend your child teacher conferences, volunteer, and communicate often. When you need help, recognize when to seek support. If you are concerned about a child, the school has different ways that they can support you. But the best way that I always recommend is to put it in writing. Send a letter requesting what services you would like for your child and what are the behaviors that you have. The schools have to respond within a number of days to your request. If you're seeing that your student's struggling with grades, schedule a meeting with the teacher. If there's emotional needs, signs of depression or anxiety, and also if you're confused about how to navigate the systems within the school. There's also different resources available. You're welcome to call Bastrop County Cares, which provides case management and basic needs support to families. Region 16 is a designated state support for school district for parent engagement, but they also have a lot of resources that you can access. Texas Appleseed, they're also amazing at parent rights and advocacy tools. And then I also want to remind that it's okay to ask for help. I myself have experienced my students being both an ISS and out of school suspension, DAEP, and I remember how embarrassing it was to me. I felt like I had failed as a parent, so I know it was embarrassing for me to ask for help. But it is important that you know that there's other parents that are experiencing the same thing, that we're not alone, and that we can support each other. Also, the agencies that I mentioned, they're here to support. They're not going to judge. Then I think we already talked about this. And then just a reminder, together we can make a difference. Stay connected, know your rights, and access resources. And so now I'll open it for questions, because I think that is the most important thing tonight, is that you are able to get your questions answered.
I think we're ready to go on that. And I have to offer my apologies. I was so excited about introducing our amazing speakers that I forgot to tell you who I am. I'm Dan Hubler, and I'm the Child and Family Programs Coordinator at Bastrop County Cares, and it's my privilege to be able to do some of the hosting this evening as well. Were you familiar with school discipline before this event? So we have people in the audience who have some familiarity with school discipline before this event. And then, were you familiar with the new House Bill 6 policy before this event? Okay, so we have one that said somewhat and one that said no. We will now go to the next question. Were you familiar with the resources presented this evening? We have two that say somewhat. I'm going to put myself as a verbal somewhat as well, but it was so helpful and insightful to see some data and some highly personalized insights on top of that. Do you know someone this might affect? Yes. And if we were to just take a straw poll in the room, I mean, I know I'm going to ask for it. Yeah, we're seeing some hands up here as well that yes, I do know. What are you hoping to take away today? This is an open-ended question. Feel free to take some time on that. What are you hoping to take away today? This is an open-ended question. Feel free to take some time on that. So we've seen two questions come up, one question and one comment. There we go. So the first question, and I think there's going to be a point where we have some more open-ended questions, but let's go ahead and address those while we can. Let me first read the comment. A positive movement for change was one of the things that was hoped for taking away today. And then one of them was, how can I advocate for improvement of the bill?
Thank you so much for that question. I think one of the biggest ways, whether you are a parent, a teacher, or a school administrator, to advocate for change under the bill is to talk to your state legislature. You know, many people do not utilize that resource enough. And it is one thing for state legislators in their offices to hear from Texas Appleseed and other community partners. But when they are hearing from their constituents and the people who are actually being impacted by the laws that are enacted, that does push them to want to make changes for the bill. Many a time, state legislators are given various data, some of which may not be truthful, but much of what comes before them is not always factual. Some of them don't have the ability to come into the community and actually hear directly from parents and teachers and other organizers, and so they really rely on hearing directly from you. So that's one thing. The second thing is raising these concerns with your community organizers like you did tonight, letting us know what your experiences have been, thinking about what Norma said about attending these school meetings and all the various things happening in your community, to continue letting it be known how you're impacted are all ways that you can advocate for change for the better under this new law. And hopefully, some changes occur that lessen a lot of the concerns or do away with the concerns that we went over tonight.
And then the question is asked, what is the max that my child can be expelled? Is that right? Okay.
I think I'm just going to stay up here. That's an interesting question because there is no max. And I think that's one thing that we need to be very clear about under HB 6. The, typical things is 6 months to a year. But again, schools have wide discretion as to how long that can be now. But generally, it has been no longer than one academic school year.
Where can I access my child's school data? This is kind of a fun answer. I like this one. Yeah.
So I think TA, you can access data information for your campus. Sometimes it's a little bit behind though, so you'll get late data. Also, I wanted to remind parents that every school has what they call a campus improvement plan. So if you go to the school website, you can download the campus improvement plan and you can see the family engagement goals and some of those needs at your campus, the principal is trying to improve. And then there's also a district improvement plan, and there's also a parent and family component. But data can be obtained at the TA website, and also you can request it at the school level. You can also request records for your child, like notes and things. So parents have those rights to request their academic records and notes that are in your child's file. Yeah, thanks. Yep.
And if I could just add, I just want to be clear that the process that Norma was referencing, you can access your child's data through a public information request. Many schools, like Norma said, are behind. Many TA data may be behind, but you still have the right to access this information. And I encourage parents, teachers, whoever the case may be, if you are requesting your personal child's data, stay on the school about getting this information. Many schools we've kind of observed put up a wall and try to make it a little bit difficult to access this information. But as a parent, you have the right to access all of that information. So if you're wanting to know specifically about your child's disciplinary records, things of that nature, you can go to the school or put in a public information request. If you're wanting to know the statistics related to your child's campus, like Norma was saying, you can go to TEA, and sometimes the district has things posted directly on their own website.
It's always great to not only have these powerful and incisive presentations, but also your questions help to bring out even more helpful information for people. And as it says here, the presentation materials will be shared after the event, and please feel free to follow up with Texas Appleseed or Bastrop County Cares for any further information on that. Okay, before we close, I did want to just give a brief thank you to those who've helped this to happen. I want to give a special thanks to our speakers who have taken the time to provide, again, powerful and nuanced insights into potential impacts from this legislation and those engaged citizens who have attended this session. The personalized research and data that you provided, Princess, gives us more input on how this impacts our specific community. You not only cited some state level data, but you took it straight to our community, which I noted, and I thought that was powerful, and we need that. Additionally, wanted to take a moment to thank Norma for giving us a variety of encouraging ways to empower our caregivers, guardians, and parents regarding student discipline. When a student is disciplined, we don't just have to be frozen and stop there. Seek help. And if you do have questions about that, if you need a reference back to that, I'm sure you can contact the Appleseed and Bastrop County Cares. So if you find yourself in that situation, you've forgotten what options are available, contact us so that we can remind you and provide you with those insights. I find myself often be like, what was that one thing that I could have used? If you think that way, ask those questions. Come contact us. Additionally, thank you to Christiane Caballero and Uyosa Elegon and the staff at Texas Appleseed and Bastrop County Cares who provided all the technical and logistical support to make this session happen. Thank you so much. And have a fantastic evening.